There comes a moment in life when everything you have built, everything you have chased, everything you thought would make you happy, suddenly feels empty, not broken, not failed, just empty. And the strangest part is, from the outside, nothing looks wrong. You are doing well. You are moving forward. You are achieving things, but inside, something feels missing. A quiet discomfort, a restlessness you can't explain, a feeling that you are running, but not arriving. This is where the story begins. Not with failure, but with success that doesn't feel like success. Welcome to audiobook mode, where you don't just hear ideas, you experience them, where stories are not just told, they are lived. And today, we are stepping into one of the most powerful transformations ever written, a story that begins with ambition, but ends with awareness, a story that begins with success, but reveals the truth behind it. This is the journey of a man who had everything and realized it was not enough. Julian Mantle was a name people respected, a high-powered lawyer, sharp, intelligent, fearless. He lived in a world most people dream about: luxury cars, expensive suits, a reputation built on winning. From the outside, he was the definition of success, but inside, he was slowly falling apart. His days were filled with pressure. Long hours stretched into endless nights. Meals were rushed. Sleep was ignored. His mind never stopped, always thinking, always chasing, always under tension. And slowly, without realizing it, he lost something important: peace. He didn't notice it at first, because success can hide discomfort. Achievement can mask emptiness. And when the world keeps rewarding you, you don't stop to question the cost, but the body always knows. And one day, it stopped him. In the middle of a courtroom, while arguing a case, Julian collapsed. A heart attack. Sudden, brutal, impossible to ignore. And in that moment, everything became clear. Because when your life is forced to pause, you finally see it, not as you imagined it, but as it truly is. And what Julian saw was not success. It was imbalance. He had spent years building a life that looked impressive, but felt empty. And for the first time, he understood something most people never do. You can win the world and still lose yourself. That moment changed him. Not slowly, not gradually, completely. He didn't go back to his old life. He didn't try to adjust it. He walked away from it. He sold everything: his house, his possessions, his identity, even his Ferrari, the very symbol of his success. Gone, and he disappeared. No explanation, no plan anyone could understand. Just gone. Because sometimes, transformation doesn't begin with improvement. It begins with letting go. Months passed. People moved on. His story faded until one day he returned, but not as the same man. He looked different, healthier, younger, but more importantly, calmer. There was a stillness about him, a presence, something most people don't have. Peace. And when he spoke, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't pressured. It was intentional, because he had discovered something deeper. Not success, but mastery. Mastery over his mind, mastery over his habits, mastery over his life. And what he brought back was not motivation, it was wisdom. Wisdom that could transform a life, not by doing more, but by understanding more. And everything begins with the mind, because your mind is where your life is created. Every thought you think shapes your reality. Every belief you hold guides your actions. Every emotion you feel influences your decisions. And yet, most people never take control of it. They let their mind wander from worry to distraction, to fear, to overthinking. And then they wonder why they feel overwhelmed. But Julian learned something simple and powerful. Your mind is like a garden. If you don't take care of it, weeds will grow, negativity, doubt, fear. But if you consciously plant focus, clarity, purpose, then your life begins to change. Because you don't experience life as it is. You experience life as your mind creates it. So he trained his mind, not with force, but with discipline, daily, consistently. He practiced focus, he practiced awareness, he practiced control. And slowly, his thoughts became clearer, his emotions became stable, his life began to align. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Controlling your mind is not easy, because your mind is used to chaos. It is used to reacting. It is used to jumping from one thought to another. So when you try to control it, it resists, it wanders, it distracts you. But that's the process, because mastery is not about perfection. It's about practice. And the more you practice, the stronger your control becomes. Now let's go deeper, because controlling your mind is only the beginning. You also need direction, purpose, because without purpose, even success feels empty. Julian realized something that changed everything. Most people are busy. but not meaningful. They wake up, they work, they chase, they repeat, but they never stop to ask, why? Why am I doing this? Why am I chasing this? Why does this matter? And without that question, life becomes automatic, routine, unfulfilling. So he began living intentionally, every action connected to a deeper reason, not just money, not just recognition, but growth, contribution, meaning. And suddenly, life felt different, not heavier, but lighter. Because when you live with purpose, your actions have direction. And when your actions have direction, your life has clarity. Now think about your own life. How many things are you doing right now without questioning them? How many habits are running your life without your awareness? Because the truth is, a life without purpose is just movement, not progress. And this is where discipline enters, not as punishment, but as structure. Because your life is not shaped by what you do once, but by what you do daily. Small actions, repeated over time. That's what creates transformation. Julian understood that change does not come from big decisions. It comes from small, consistent actions, daily rituals, quiet habits, intentional routines. Because what you do every day becomes who you become. So he built a structure for his life. Not a rigid schedule, but a purposeful rhythm. He began his mornings differently. Not with noise, not with distraction, but with stillness. Because how you start your day shapes everything that follows. Most people wake up and immediately enter chaos, notifications, messages, thoughts, pressure, before their mind even has a chance to settle. But Julian created space to breathe, space to think, space to align himself with his purpose. He would sit in silence, even if only for a few minutes, observing his thoughts, not controlling them, not judging them, just watching. And slowly, the noise began to fade because when you stop feeding your mind constant stimulation, it begins to calm itself. And in that calm, clarity appears. Julian understood that change does not come from big decisions. It comes from small, consistent actions, daily rituals, quiet habits, intentional routines. Because what you do every day becomes who you become. So he built a structure for his life, not a rigid schedule, but a purposeful rhythm. He began his mornings differently, not with noise, not with distraction, but with stillness. Because how you start your day shapes everything that follows. Most people wake up and immediately enter chaos, notifications, messages, thoughts, pressure, before their mind even has a chance to settle. But Julian created space to breathe, space to think, space to align himself with his purpose. He would sit in silence, even if only for a few minutes, observing his thoughts, not controlling them, not judging them, just watching. And slowly, the noise began to fade. Because when you stop feeding your mind constant stimulation, it begins to calm itself. And in that calm, clarity appears. This is something most people never experience because they are always busy, always distracted, always moving. But clarity does not come from movement. It comes from stillness. And this is where everything changes. Because when your mind becomes clear, your decisions become clear, your actions become focused, and your life begins to move with intention. Now, here's something important. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about choosing what matters over what feels easy. Because comfort is seductive. It pulls you toward distraction, toward laziness, toward temporary pleasure. But discipline pulls you toward growth, toward purpose, toward long-term fulfillment. And every time you choose discipline, you strengthen yourself, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Julian practiced this daily, not perfectly, but consistently. And over time, it became natural. Because discipline is not something you do, it is something you become. Now let's go deeper, because there is something even more powerful than discipline. And that is awareness. Awareness of how you live, how you think, how you react. Because most people live unconsciously. They react to situations. They follow habits. They repeat patterns without ever questioning them. But once you become aware, everything changes. Because now you can choose. Choose your thoughts. Choose your actions. Choose your direction. And that is where real power lies. Not in controlling the world, but in controlling yourself. Now imagine living like that. Not reacting impulsively. Not being controlled by emotions, but choosing every action with intention. That is freedom. Real freedom. Not external freedom, but internal freedom. And once you experience that, you will never want to go back. Because life becomes simpler, clearer, more meaningful. Not because problems disappear, but because you see them differently. You respond differently, and that changes everything. Now, let's move to something even deeper, because at the heart of this transformation is something most people ignore: silence. In today's world, silence feels uncomfortable, almost unnatural, because we are constantly surrounded by noise, music, notifications, social media, endless information, and without realizing it, we become dependent on it. We fill every empty moment, every pause, every quiet second. But in doing that, we lose something important: connection with ourselves. Because silence is not empty, it is full of clarity, full of awareness, full of understanding. Julian discovered this in the mountains, where there was no noise, no distraction, just stillness. And at first, it was uncomfortable because his mind was used to stimulation, used to activity, used to chaos. But slowly, something shifted. The thoughts slowed down, the noise faded, and in that silence, he began to hear something new: his own voice, not the voice of society, not the voice of expectation, but his true thoughts, his true desires, his true direction. And that changed everything. Because when you truly understand yourself, you stop chasing things that don't matter. You stop living based on others' expectations. You start living based on your truth. And that is powerful, because most people never reach that point. They spend their entire lives chasing what they think they should want instead of discovering what they truly want. But silence reveals that it strips away the noise, the pressure, the distractions, and shows you what actually matters. So Julian made silence a practice, not once, not occasionally, daily, even if just for a few minutes, because consistency is what creates change. Now think about your own life. When was the last time you sat in complete silence? No phone, no music, no distraction, just you and your thoughts. For most people, that feels uncomfortable because they are not used to it, but that discomfort is where growth begins. Because in that silence, you will see things clearly, things you've been avoiding, things you've been ignoring. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. And that is where transformation starts. Now let's go even deeper, because understanding yourself is one thing, but living in alignment with that understanding is another. And that requires energy, not just time. Energy. Most people focus on time, managing schedules, planning tasks, trying to do more, but they ignore something more important: their energy. Because you can have time, but no energy. And when that happens, nothing works. Julian realized this. He stopped pushing himself endlessly, stopped exhausting himself, and started protecting his energy through rest, through balance, through mindful living. Because when your energy is high, everything becomes easier. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become stable. Your actions become effective. And your life feels lighter. Now, here's something powerful. Burnout is not caused by doing too much. It is caused by doing too much, without purpose, without balance, without awareness. And that is the difference. Because when your actions are aligned, they energize you. But when they are not, they drain you. So Julian began living differently, not faster, but smarter, not harder, but more intentionally. And that changed everything. Because now he was not just living, he was experiencing life fully, deeply, meaningfully. And that is something most people miss because they are too busy chasing life to actually live it. Now let's bring everything together, because at the core of this journey is something simple but life-changing: gratitude, not as a concept, not as a trend, but as a daily practice. Most people live in what's missing, what they don't have, what they want, what they're chasing. And because of that, they never feel satisfied, no matter how much they achieve, because the focus is always ahead, always on the next thing, the next goal, the next success. But Julian discovered something different. When you shift your focus to what you already have, something changes. Your mind slows down, your emotions soften, your perspective expands. You begin to notice things you ignored: moments, people, experiences. And suddenly, life feels richer, not because you have more, but because you see more. This is the power of gratitude. It doesn't change your situation. It changes your perception. And perception changes everything, because when you feel grateful, you feel present. And when you feel present, you feel alive. Now here's the key. Gratitude does not mean you stop growing. It means you grow without losing yourself, without chasing endlessly, without feeling empty. Because now you are not chasing happiness, you are living it. And that is the difference. Now think about your life. How often do you pause and appreciate what you already have? Not what you want, not what you're working toward, but what is already there. Because most people skip this. They move too fast. They focus too much on the future. And in doing so, they miss the present. But life is not lived in the future. It is lived now. And if you miss now, you miss life. This is what Julian understood. And this is what transformed him. Not success, not money, not achievement, but awareness. Awareness of how he was living. Awareness of what truly mattered. Awareness of what he needed to change. And once he had that awareness, everything else followed, because awareness leads to choice, and choice leads to change. Now let's come back to you, because this is not just his story. It's yours too. You may not be a lawyer. You may not have had a dramatic collapse, but the patterns are the same. The stress, the pressure, the constant chasing, the feeling that something is missing. And the truth is, you don't need a breakdown. To have a breakthrough, you just need awareness, because once you see clearly, you can change direction. And that's what matters. Not perfection, not overnight transformation, but direction. So take a moment, pause, and ask yourself, am I living intentionally or just reacting to life? Am I chasing things that truly matter or things I was told to chase? Am I building a life that feels good or just looks good? Because the answers to these questions can change everything. Here on Audiobook Mode, this is what we do. We don't just share ideas, we create awareness, because awareness is the beginning of change. So if something in this stayed with you, don't ignore it. That's where your transformation begins. Subscribe to Audiobook Mode, because this is where clarity grows. And before you leave, I want you to do one simple thing. Comment one word, awareness, if you're ready to live more intentionally. Because in the end, it's not about how much you achieve. It's about how deeply you live. And once you understand that, you stop chasing life and start experiencing it.